Dr. Winters led Lily through the quiet hallways of the conservatory, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Her heart was still racing, hands trembling slightly, not just from being caught, but from the lingering sensation of finally touching those keys after years of dreaming. "Your father works in the East Wing tonight, right?" Dr. Winters asked. Lily nodded, her throat too dry to speak. What would her dad say? He had always been so careful, so worried about keeping his job. "Please don't think he knew," she managed finally. "He always told me not to touch anything." Dr. Winters smiled gently. "I believe you. But what you just did, that wasn't just touching a piano, Lily. That was something else entirely." They found Mr. Chen on his knees, carefully polishing the baseboards in one of the classrooms. When he saw Dr. Winters, he immediately stood up, wiping his hands nervously on his uniform pants. "Dr. Winters, sir," he said with a small bow of his head, a habit from his childhood in Taiwan that he had never quite lost. His eyes darted to Lily with concern. "Is everything okay?" "Mr. Chen," Dr. Winters said, "I need to show you something." He held out his phone. "May I?" Confused, Mr. Chen nodded, and Dr. Winters pressed play on the video he had just captured. The beautiful sounds of Chopin filled the small classroom, and Mr. Chen's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized what he was seeing. His own daughter playing the conservatory's prized Steinway with a grace and feeling that seemed impossible. "Lily," he whispered, looking up at her. "This is you?" She nodded, eyes downcast, still afraid she had done something terribly wrong. Mr. Chen looked back at the phone, then at Dr. Winters, then at his daughter. "I don't understand," he said finally. "She never had lessons. We could never," he trailed off, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. They could never afford such luxuries on a janitor's salary. "That's what makes this so extraordinary," Dr. Winters said, taking his phone back. "Your daughter has what we call natural talent. But it's more than that. Many people have talent. What Lily has is something rarer, a gift." Mr. Chen looked at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. All these years he had worked hard to give her a decent life, to keep a roof over their heads after her mother passed away. He had brought her to work with him because they couldn't afford childcare, and later because she enjoyed the quiet of the building after hours. Never once had he imagined that she had been soaking in the music all around her, learning in silence. "I'm sorry, Dad," Lily said softly. "I know you said not to touch anything." To her surprise, her father's eyes filled with tears. "No, Lily, I'm sorry. I never knew. I never thought." He reached out and took her hand, his own still rough from years of manual work. "Your mother would have been so proud." Dr. Winters cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, with your permission, I'd like to share this video with some colleagues, and I'd like to offer Lily a chance to audition formally for our scholarship program." Mr. Chen looked stunned. "Scholarship? But she has no training." "That can be addressed," Dr. Winters said. "What can't be taught is what she already has." The ride home that night was quiet, both father and daughter lost in their own thoughts. Their small apartment felt different somehow when they entered, as if the walls had expanded slightly to make room for new possibilities. "Are you angry with me?" Lily asked as her father made them both a late dinner of simple noodle soup. He shook his head. "No, surprised, yes, but not angry." He stirred the soup thoughtfully. "I always wanted more for you than what I could give. I just never imagined it would come like this." The next morning, Lily woke to the sound of her father talking in the living room. Curious, she crept to her bedroom door and listened. "Yes, I understand. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. we'll be there," he was saying. Then after a pause, "How many views?" Another pause. "I see. Thank you." When she emerged from her room, he was sitting on their worn couch, looking dazed. "Dad, what's happening?" He looked up. "That was Dr. Winters, the video he took of you playing. He shared it with some colleagues last night. One of them posted it online." He swallowed hard. "Lily, over 100,000 people have watched you play." The number meant nothing to Lily. It was too big to comprehend. Is that bad?" "No," he said. "It's incredible. Dr. Winters says his phone hasn't stopped ringing. People want to know who you are." He paused. "He's arranged a proper audition for you tomorrow, with the scholarship committee." The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Mr. Chen called in sick for the first time in 15 years, so he could help Lily prepare. They had no idea what to do, really. They had no formal clothes for her to wear, no experience with auditions. In the end, they decided she would wear her school uniform. At least it was neat and clean. When they arrived at the conservatory the next day, something felt immediately different. The usual hushed atmosphere had been replaced by an excited buzz. People Lily had never seen before moved quickly through the hallways, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. And when she and her father walked in, heads turned. "There she is," someone whispered. "That's her." Dr. Winters met them at the entrance to the main performance hall, a grand space Lily had only glimpsed through closed doors before. "Ah, you're here. Good. There's been a slight change of plans," he said, looking both excited and a bit nervous himself. "Is the audition canceled?" Lily asked, feeling both disappointed and relieved. "Not exactly." Dr. Winters adjusted his glasses. "The thing is, the video has spread rather farther than I anticipated. A few people saw it who don't usually take notice of conservatory matters." He led them into the hall and Lily froze. The space was massive, with rows of plush seats leading down to a stage where a single grand piano waited, even more magnificent than the one she had played in the practice room. But what made her breath catch was that the first 3 rows of seats were filled with people, serious-looking people in expensive clothes, all talking among themselves until the doors opened. Then, like a wave, silence spread through the room as every head turned to look at her. "Lily," Dr. Winters said quietly, "these are members of our scholarship committee, yes, but we also have some special guests. People who saw your video and wanted to hear you play in person." From the front row, a tall woman with silver hair stood up. Even Lily, who knew little of the classical music world, recognized her face from posters that hung in the conservatory hallways. "Isabel Durant, one of the greatest living pianists. So this is our mystery girl," Durant said, her accent faintly French. "Come closer, child. Let us see you properly." Lily looked at her father in panic. Mr. Chen seemed equally overwhelmed but gave her a small nod of encouragement. Together, they walked down the center aisle toward the stage. "Is it true you've never had a lesson?" Another voice called out, a man with wild gray hair and intense eyes. "Yes, sir," Lily managed to say. "And you played Chopin's Nocturne without sheet music? From memory after only hearing it?" She nodded, wishing she could disappear. "Impossible," someone muttered. "And yet we all saw it," Durant replied. She turned to Lily with piercing eyes. "Will you play for us now? Not Chopin this time. Something different." She nodded to a young assistant who stepped forward with sheets of music. "This is Debussy's Clair de Lune. Have you heard it before?" Lily looked at the sheet music in confusion. She recognized the title. It was a piece played often by the advanced students. But the notes on the page meant little to her. She had never learned to read music. I don't know how to read this," she admitted, her face burning with embarrassment. A murmur ran through the audience. Durant raised an eyebrow. "You cannot read music?" "No, ma'am." "Then how did you learn Chopin?" "I listened," Lily said simply. "I watched the students practice. I remembered how it sounded, how their hands moved." Durant exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Very well," she said after a moment. "Thomas, would you play Clair de Lune once for our young friend?" A young man moved to a smaller piano at the side of the stage and began to play the dreamy, delicate piece. Lily closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. She felt the gentle rise and fall of the melody, the way it seemed to shimmer like moonlight on water. When the young man finished, Durant turned back to Lily. "Now you," she said. "Play what you just heard." Lily walked slowly to the grand piano, terribly aware of all the eyes on her. She sat down, adjusted the bench as she had seen others do, and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. The piece was complex, with subtle shifts in rhythm and tone. What if she couldn't do it? What if the video had been a fluke, a one-time miracle that couldn't be repeated? She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were hesitant, but as the music flowed from her memory to her fingers, she gained confidence. It wasn't a perfect replica of what the young man had played. There were notes she missed, phrases she simplified. But what emerged was undeniably Clair de Lune, played with a sensitivity and emotional depth that silenced the room. When she finished, she kept her eyes closed for a moment, afraid to see the disappointment she was sure would be on their faces. But when she finally looked up, what she saw instead was wonder. Isabel Durant was the first to speak. In 40 years of teaching, she said quietly. "I have never seen anything like this." She turned to Dr. Winters. "Your scholarship committee can make whatever decision they like, but I will be taking this girl as my personal student if she and her father agree." Mr. Chen, standing at the edge of the stage, looked as if he might faint. "But the cost," he began, "is not your concern," Durant cut him off. "Talent like this comes perhaps once in a generation. It would be a crime to let it go unnurtured." As the implications of what was happening began to sink in, Lily felt a strange mixture of joy and terror. Everything was changing so fast. Just 2 days ago, she had been invisible. Just the janitor's daughter moving quietly through the background of other people's musical journeys. Now somehow she had become the center of attention, with legendary musicians rearranging their lives to teach her. She looked at her father, seeking reassurance. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, but he was smiling. A full, genuine smile she hadn't seen since before her mother died. "Your mother always said you were meant for something special," he said softly. "I think this is it, Lily. This is your path." As the adults around them began discussing logistics, living arrangements, practice schedules, public appearances, Lily turned back to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. They felt different now, not just smooth ivory and ebony, but a bridge to a future she had never dared to imagine. A future where the music that had lived so long in her head could finally be set free for everyone to hear. The world seemed to spin faster with each passing day. Lily sat by the window of her new bedroom, watching rain trickle down the glass as she tried to make sense of how completely her life had changed in just 3 weeks. The apartment she now shared with her father was nothing like their old one. Located just 2 blocks from the conservatory, it had gleaming hardwood floors, tall ceilings, and, most incredible of all, a baby grand piano in the living room. "On loan," Madame Durant had explained, as if lending expensive musical instruments was as casual as sharing a cup of sugar. Her father still worked at the conservatory, but things were different there too. The other maintenance staff treated him with a new kind of respect, and even the students and teachers who had previously looked through him now stopped to chat. Some asked about Lily. Others simply wanted to tell him how her video had moved them. The video, it still felt unreal that millions of people had watched her play. News outlets had picked up the story. Janitor's daughter reveals extraordinary musical gift, and interview requests flooded in. Dr. Winters had helped them navigate this strange new territory, bringing in the conservatory's public relations team to manage the sudden attention. Lily's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend. "Zoe, OMG, they're talking about you on Morning Beat. Turn it on now." With trembling fingers, Lily grabbed the remote and turned on the television that came with the apartment. She flipped to the channel just in time to see a clip of her playing the Steinway that night, followed by footage from her audition with Madame Durant, being called a once-in-a-generation talent, a polished news anchor was saying. The 16-year-old, who had never taken a piano lesson before this month, has been offered full scholarships to 5 prestigious music schools and has accepted personal mentorship from legendary pianist Isabelle Durant. The screen split to show the anchor speaking with a music critic. "What makes this story so compelling," the critic said, "is not just the girl's raw talent, but how she acquired it. She essentially taught herself by watching and listening to students practice while her father cleaned the conservatory. It's like a modern fairy tale." Lily turned off the TV, her cheeks burning. She wasn't used to being talked about like this, like she was some kind of miracle instead of just a girl who loved music. A gentle knock sounded at her door. "Lily, are you ready?" her father called. Today was her first official lesson with Madame Durant. Despite having already played for her several times, Lily's stomach twisted with nerves. "Coming, Dad," she called back, taking one last look in the mirror. She barely recognized herself in the new clothes they'd bought for her. First day of formal training. A simple blue dress and cardigan that looked much more sophisticated than anything she'd owned before. Her father waited by the door, keys in hand. He too looked different these days, still in his work uniform but standing taller somehow, the permanent worry lines around his eyes softening. "Nervous?" he asked as they stepped out into the rainy morning. Lily nodded. "What if I can't do it? What if they realize I'm not what they thought?" Mr. Chen put his arm around her shoulders as they walked. "You are exactly what they think you are. Lily, you just don't see it yet." The conservatory hummed with its usual morning activity. Students rushing to classes, the sound of various instruments drifting from practice rooms. But there was a new energy when Lily walked in, a ripple of whispers and glances that followed her through the halls. Madame Durant was waiting in a private studio, her silver hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her posture as elegant as a dancer's even in her 70s. "Ah, Lily, right on time." She nodded to Mr. Chen. "You may stay for this first lesson if you wish, Mr. Chen." "Thank you," he said, settling quietly in a corner chair. Madame Durant gestured to the piano bench. "Sit." Lily obeyed, her back straight, hands folded in her lap as she'd seen the students do. "Today," Madame Durant said, pacing slowly behind her, "we begin from the beginning. You have an extraordinary gift for hearing and reproducing music, but there are fundamentals you need to learn if you're to develop properly." She placed a sheet of music on the stand, simple scales and finger exercises. "I know it seems basic," she said, noting Lily's slight frown, "but it's like a dancer learning positions or a writer learning grammar. We must build the foundation before the house." What followed was 2 hours of the most intense concentration Lily had ever experienced. Madame Durant was precise, demanding, and occasionally sharp when Lily made mistakes. But she was also patient in explaining concepts Lily had never encountered: time signatures, key changes, the proper way to position her hands to avoid strain. By the end of the lesson, Lily's fingers ached and her head swam with new information. But there was also a deep satisfaction in beginning to understand the structure behind the music she had always just felt instinctively. "You did well," Madame Durant said as the lesson concluded. "But now the real work begins. You must practice these exercises 3 hours each day, and—" she placed a thick book on the piano. "You must begin learning to read music." Lily looked at the book with a mixture of excitement and dread. "It seemed impossibly complex. Is it necessary?" she asked hesitantly. "I mean, I can play by ear. Can a great chef cook without knowing ingredients? Can a writer tell stories without knowing words?" Madame Durant's tone was firm but not unkind. "Your ear is a gift, but notation is the language of music. To truly master it, you must speak its language fluently." As they left the conservatory, Mr. Chen noticed his daughter's quiet mood. "Too much?" he asked gently. Lily shook her head. "No, it's just different than I expected. More technical. All great things require work," he said. "Even natural talents." When they returned to the apartment, Lily was surprised to find Dr. Winters waiting for them, along with a woman she didn't recognize. "Ah, there you are," Dr. Winters said, rising from the sofa. "How was the first lesson?" "Intense," Lily admitted. He smiled knowingly. "Madame Durant is a demanding teacher, but there's no one better." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Ms. Patel from the conservatory's board of trustees. She has something she'd like to discuss with you both." Ms. Patel, a sharp-eyed woman in a crisp business suit, got straight to the point. "We've been approached by Carnegie Hall. They're putting together a special showcase of emerging talents, and they want Lily to perform." Lily felt the blood drain from her face.
Carnegie Hall?
"But I've only had one lesson." "That's precisely why they want you," Ms. Patel explained. "Your story has captured people's imagination. The girl who taught herself to play by watching others, now on one of the world's greatest stages."
It's compelling. When would this be?
Mr. Chen asked, his protective instincts clearly kicking in. 6 weeks from now." "That's not enough time," Lily said, panic rising in her throat. "I'm just learning basics. I can't perform at Carnegie Hall." Dr. Winters leaned forward. "Lily, you've already played beautifully without any formal training. This isn't about technical perfection. It's about sharing your gift, your story." "But what would I even play?" she asked. "That's up to you and Madame Durant," Ms. Patel said. "But they're hoping for something that showcases your ability to play by ear. Perhaps something you've never performed before, learned specifically for this event." The idea was terrifying and thrilling all at once. Lily looked to her father for guidance. "It's your decision," he said, "but remember what your mother used to say about opportunities." Lily smiled slightly at the memory. "They don't always knock twice," she finished. Her mother had been a firm believer in seizing chances when they came, perhaps because she'd had so few in her own life. "I'll do it," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "if Madame Durant agrees to help me prepare." The next day, when Lily told her teacher about the Carnegie Hall invitation, She expected resistance. Instead, Madame Durant nodded thoughtfully. "I suspected this might happen," she said. "Your story is too compelling for them to resist." She tapped her fingers on the piano, thinking, "We will need to choose your piece carefully. Something that shows your gift but doesn't require years of technical training." She looked at Lily with sudden intensity. "Tell me, what music moves you most? Not what you think you should play, but what speaks to your heart." Lily considered. "There's a piece I heard once late at night. A student was practicing it after hours. It was like water and moonlight and something sad but beautiful all at once. Can you hum it?" Lily closed her eyes and reproduced the haunting melody as best she could. Madame Durant's eyes widened slightly. "Rachmaninoff. Prelude in G minor." She shook her head. "Ambitious. But perhaps—" She played the opening bars and Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's it. This is normally for advanced students," Madame Durant warned. "But your hands are the right size, and with your ear—" She made a decision. "We will work on this together. Not just by ear, but reading the music as well. It will be your introduction to notation, challenging but meaningful." The weeks that followed were the most demanding of Lily's life. She practiced until her fingers cramped, learning not just to play the notes but to understand them on the page. Madame Durant pushed her relentlessly, sometimes keeping her at the piano for 4 hours straight, repeating passages until they were perfect. At night, Lily would often find her father sitting in the dark living room, listening to her practice recordings with his eyes closed. "Do you think Mom would have liked it?" she asked him one evening. He smiled in the dim light. "She would have loved it. But more importantly, she would have loved seeing you so alive." As the performance date grew closer, the pressure intensified. Journalists called daily. Fellow students at the conservatory, where Lily now took regular classes, alternated between admiration and jealousy. Some questioned whether she deserved such opportunities with so little formal training. 3 days before the Carnegie Hall showcase, disaster struck. During a particularly intense practice session, Lily's right hand seized with pain, a sharp, burning sensation that made her cry out. Madame Durant immediately stopped the lesson. "Tendinitis," she diagnosed grimly. "Overuse. You've been pushing too hard," a doctor confirmed it the next day. "Rest, ice, anti-inflammatories," he prescribed. "No piano for at least 2 weeks." "But Carnegie Hall is in 3 days." Lily protested, tears welling in her eyes. The doctor looked sympathetic but firm. "If you play now, you risk permanent damage. Is one performance worth sacrificing your future career?" Lily spent that night crying into her pillow, all the stress and pressure of the past weeks pouring out in waves of disappointment and fear. Her father sat beside her, stroking her hair as he had when she was small. "Maybe this is a sign," she whispered. "Maybe I'm not meant for this after all. Or maybe," he said gently, "it's a lesson about limits. Even the most talented musicians are still human, Lily. They get hurt. They make mistakes. They rest and heal." The next morning, Lily called Madame Durant herself to break the news. To her surprise, her teacher was calm. "These things happen," she said, "especially when talent outpaces training. Your body needs time to catch up with what your mind can do. But the showcase will happen without you this time. There will be others." The disappointment was crushing, but also strangely freeing. For the first time since that fateful night at the piano, Lily had time to think, to breathe, to process all that had happened. The day the Carnegie Hall showcase was to take place, a bouquet of white lilies arrived at their apartment with a card signed by all the performers. "Wishing you a speedy recovery. The stage awaits your return." That evening, as Lily sat with her father watching a live stream of the event she should have been part of, she felt a curious sense of peace. The music was beautiful, the performers brilliant, but she didn't feel jealous or regretful. Instead, she felt something new, patience. "I'll get there," she said softly, more to herself than to her father. "Not today, but someday. And when I do, I'll be ready. All of me, not just my fingers." Mr. Chen smiled and squeezed her shoulder. "That," he said, "is the first truly wise thing I've heard you say about music." As they watched the final performer take her bow, Lily flexed her healing hand gently. The pain was subsiding, and with it the frantic rush that had consumed her these past weeks. In its place grew a deeper, steadier determination. The path ahead would be long and challenging. There would be technical skills to master, music theory to learn, perhaps even failures and setbacks along the way. But for the first time, Lily understood that her journey with music wasn't a sprint. It was a lifetime. And she was just getting started. 6 months passed like a dream. Spring turned to summer, and summer faded into a golden autumn. Lily's days settled into a rhythm. Morning classes at the conservatory, afternoon lessons with Madame Durant, evenings practicing on her baby grand piano while her father cooked dinner in their new kitchen. The tendinitis in her right hand had healed completely, but it left behind a valuable lesson. Lily now wore a special brace during long practice sessions and took regular breaks, stretching her fingers and wrists as the physical therapist had taught her. More importantly, she had learned to listen to her body, to recognize the difference between productive discomfort and the warning signs of injury. "Much better," Madame Durant said one afternoon, as Lily completed a particularly challenging passage of Mozart. "Your technique has improved tremendously." Lily smiled, accepting the rare compliment. Madame Durant was not one for excessive praise, believing it bred complacency. But when she did offer approval, it felt like sunshine after rain. "You're ready," the silver-haired pianist declared, closing the sheet music with a decisive snap. "Ready for what?" Lily asked, curious about the spark of excitement in her teacher's normally composed expression. "The winter showcase, of course." Madame Durant arched an elegant eyebrow. "It's time for you to perform again. Not at Carnegie Hall, not yet. But here at the conservatory where your journey began." The winter showcase was an annual tradition, featuring the conservatory's most promising students. In the past, Lily had glimpsed it only through cracked doors while helping her father clean up afterward. A glittering event with the students in formal attire, playing for a packed auditorium of family, friends, and potential benefactors. "Are you sure I'm ready?" Lily asked, the memory of her last planned performance still fresh in her mind. "6 months ago you had raw talent but no foundation," Madame Durant said. "Now you have both. You've learned to read music, your technique has solidified, and most importantly," she tapped Lily's wrist, where she'd once worn the brace, "you've learned your limits." That evening, Lily shared the news with her father over dinner. "The winter showcase," he repeated, his eyes crinkling with pride. "I remember how you used to peek through the door at the end of those events, watching the students take their final bows." He chuckled. "Now they'll be watching you." Lily toyed with her food, suddenly not very hungry. "What if I mess up? What if my hand hurts again? What if you're wonderful?" Her father interrupted gently. "What if this is exactly where you're meant to be?" The next few weeks flew by in a blur of preparation. Lily had to choose her piece, fine-tune her technique, and get measured for a formal dress, all while keeping up with her regular studies. She had recently begun composition classes as well, learning to write her own music under the guidance of Dr. Winters, who had discovered an unexpected talent for teaching. For her showcase piece, Madame Durant suggested Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the very piece that had started Lily's journey when she played it by ear in the empty practice room that fateful night. "But this time," her teacher said, "you'll play it properly, with full understanding of its structure and theory. The audience will hear how far you've come." November arrived with a dusting of early snow, transforming the conservatory's Gothic architecture into something from a winter fairy tale. Posters for the winter showcase appeared in the hallways, featuring the names of the 12 selected performers. Lily's name was among them, listed alphabetically with no special treatment, exactly how she wanted it. 2 weeks before the showcase, Dr. Winters called Lily into his office after her composition class. "I have news," he said, his usual calm demeanor tinged with excitement. "We have a special guest attending the winter showcase this year, someone who specifically asked if you would be performing." Lily sat straighter. "Who?" "Anton Visser." The name hit Lily like a physical force. Anton Visser was perhaps the most renowned composer of contemporary classical music in the world, famous not only for his brilliant compositions, but for his reclusive nature. He rarely attended public events and gave even fewer interviews. "Why would he care about me?" she asked, genuinely confused. Dr. Winters smiled. "Apparently he saw your video, the original one, from that night in the practice room. He said it reminded him of why he started composing in the first place, to capture that pure emotional connection to music." Lily felt her pulse quicken. Will I have to meet him?" "He's requested it, yes. After the showcase, Dr. Winters studied her anxious expression. Don't worry. By all accounts, he's quite kind, despite his reputation for perfectionism. That night, Lily could hardly sleep. She kept thinking about Anton Visser, imagining his critical ear listening to her performance, judging her technical progress against the raw emotion of her first spontaneous playing. What if he was disappointed? What if the training had somehow diminished the very quality that had caught his attention? In the morning, she arrived early at the conservatory, slipping into her favorite practice room before classes began. But instead of practicing Chopin, she sat at the piano with her composition notebook open, filled with the pieces she had been working on in Dr. Winters' class. Most were simple exercises, 16-bar melodies, harmonic progressions, variations on classical themes, but in the back pages were her own creations, pieces that came to her in dreams or while walking through the park near their apartment. Music that didn't sound like Chopin or Mozart or anyone else. Music that sounded like Lily. She played one of these pieces now, a gentle, wistful melody that reminded her of her mother. It wasn't technically complex like the Chopin she would perform at the showcase, but it carried something else, a piece of her heart. That's lovely, a voice said from the doorway. Is it yours? Lily jumped, her fingers hitting a jarring chord. A tall woman with kind eyes and a warm smile stood watching her, Ms. Rivera, the vocal instructor whose classroom was across the hall. Yes, Lily admitted, closing her notebook shyly. Just something I've been working on. Ms. Rivera entered the room, her long skirt swishing as she moved. It's beautiful, different from what you usually play, Lily nodded. It's not as technically impressive as Chopin. Technical impression isn't everything, Ms. Rivera said, sitting beside Lily on the bench. Some of the most beloved music in history is relatively simple in structure. What matters is how it makes people feel. She nodded toward the notebook. May I? Hesitantly, Lily opened her composition book again. Ms. Rivera looked through it, humming softly as she read. You have a gift for melody, she said finally. Have you considered playing one of your own compositions for the showcase? Lily shook her head quickly. Oh no, I couldn't. Madame Durant and I have been preparing the Chopin for weeks. And besides, my pieces aren't... They're not... Not what? Ms. Rivera prompted gently. Not good enough, Lily whispered. Not for someone like Anton Visser to hear. Understanding dawned in Ms. Rivera's eyes. Ah, so you've heard he's coming. Listen to me, Lily. Anton Visser doesn't care about perfection. He cares about authenticity. That's why your video moved him. Because it was real. She tapped the notebook. This is real too. The idea planted itself in Lily's mind and wouldn't let go. All day as she moved through her classes and lessons, she thought about her compositions, about Anton Visser, about authenticity versus perfection. That afternoon, she gathered her courage and brought her notebook to her lesson with Madame Durant. What's this? Her teacher asked, taking the handwritten pages. My compositions, Lily said, her voice steadier than she felt. I was wondering. That is, I thought maybe, instead of the Chopin. Understanding crossed Madame Durant's face. She flipped through the notebook silently, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to the piano and played one of Lily's melodies, the one about her mother, with a technical precision and emotional depth that made it sound better than Lily had ever imagined it. Could when she finished. Madame Durant turned back to her student. You want to play this for the showcase instead? It wasn't a question, but Lily nodded anyway. It's not as impressive as the ballade, she said. I know that. But it's me. Madame Durant was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, When I first heard you play, what struck me wasn't your technique, which was frankly quite rough, but your voice, your musical voice. I've spent these months giving you the technical foundation to express that voice more clearly. She closed the notebook and handed it back to Lily. Perhaps it's time to let it speak again. The night of the winter showcase arrived cold and clear, stars shining like diamonds above the conservatory's spires. The auditorium hummed with excited conversation as guests found their seats, programs rustling in hand. Backstage, Lily peeked through the curtain, scanning the audience. Her father sat in the front row, wearing a new suit bought specially for the occasion. Beside him was an empty seat reserved for Madame Durant, who was currently backstage offering last-minute advice to her nervous students. In the center of the third row, slightly apart from the others, sat a lean, distinguished man with steel-gray hair and intense eyes. Anton Visser. Lily's heart stuttered at the sight of him. "Nervous?" a voice asked behind her. Lily turned to find Zoe, her best friend, who had been accepted to the conservatory's vocal program 3 months ago. "Terrified," Lily admitted. Zoe squeezed her hand. "Don't be. You're going to be amazing." One by one, the performers took the stage. A violinist playing Paganini, a cellist performing Bach, a vocal quartet singing Mozart, all technically brilliant, the product of years of dedicated training. And then it was Lily's turn. As she walked onto the stage, the polished black grand piano waiting for her like an old friend, she caught her father's eye. He gave her a small nod, and in that simple gesture was all the encouragement she needed. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. Then she began to play, not Chopin's ballade but her own composition, the piece she had written for her mother. It started softly, like a question, the melody simple but haunting. Then it built, adding harmonies and counter-melodies, growing in complexity and emotion. There were technical flaws, moments where her fingers didn't move quite as smoothly as they might have, transitions that could have been more elegant. But there was also something else, something that couldn't be taught or practiced, a pure, direct line from her heart to the keys. As she played the final notes, letting them fade gently into silence, Lily kept her eyes closed, afraid to see the audience's reaction. Would they be disappointed not to hear the Chopin? Would they find her composition amateurish compared to the classical masterpieces performed by the other students? Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous wave that washed over her. She opened her eyes to see the audience on their feet, her father wiping tears from his eyes, Madame Durant nodding with quiet approval, and in the third row, Anton Visser stood perfectly still amidst the applause, his intense gaze fixed on Lily with an expression of profound recognition. One composer seeing another. Later, at the reception, he would tell her that her composition had moved him more than any piece he had heard in years. He would offer to mentor her in composition, to help her develop her unique voice. It would be the beginning of yet another unexpected chapter in her musical journey. But in this moment, as the applause surrounded her like an embrace, all Lily could think was that she had finally found her true place at the piano, not just playing the music of masters who had come before, but creating her own, adding her voice to the grand, ongoing symphony of human expression. And somewhere she felt certain, her mother was listening. 3 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Seasons changed, lessons continued, and Lily bloomed like a flower turning toward the sun. Now 19, she had grown into a young woman, whose quiet confidence matched her remarkable talent. The shabby practice room where her journey had begun was now preserved as something of a shrine at the conservatory. The discovery room, students called it. Sometimes, when the pressure of performances and competitions became too much, Lily would slip away to sit in that room, remembering the night when her fingers first touched piano keys. "You're doing it again," her father said one evening, finding her lost in thought at their apartment window. "That faraway look," Lily smiled. Just thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow was no ordinary day. It marked her debut at Carnegie Hall, the opportunity she'd missed 3 years ago due to her injury. But this time she wasn't playing Rachmaninoff or Chopin. She would be performing her own composition, a piano concerto she'd written under Anton Visser's mentorship. "Nervous?" her father asked, sitting beside her on the window seat. "A little," she admitted, "but a different kind of nervous than before." She searched for the right words. "Back then I was afraid of failing. Now I'm just aware of the moment. How special it is." Her father nodded, understanding as always. Though he still worked at the conservatory, refusing to quit despite Lily's success, he had changed too. He stood taller now, spoke more confidently, had even begun taking night classes to earn his long-delayed college degree. "Your mother would be so proud," he said, the familiar words carrying a deeper resonance after all they'd been through. "I know," Lily replied softly. "I feel her sometimes when I play." The doorbell rang, interrupting their quiet moment. Mr. Chen rose to answer it, returning with a small package. "For you," he said, handing it to Lily. "From Madame Durant." Lily opened the package carefully. Inside was a delicate silver hair clip shaped like a musical note, nestled in velvet. A card in Madame Durant's elegant handwriting read simply, "For tomorrow, shine as only you can." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes, though their relationship had evolved, with Lily now studying composition primarily with Anton, Visser while continuing advanced piano with Madame Durant, her first teacher, remained one of the most important people in her life. The stern pianist had gradually become something between a mentor and a grandmother figure, her rigorous standards balanced by genuine care. "It's beautiful," Lily whispered, holding the clip up to the light. Her father smiled. "You should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." But sleep proved elusive. Lily tossed and turned, her mind racing through the notes of her concerto, imagining the hall, the orchestra, the audience. Not just any audience, every seat had been sold out weeks in advance, with critics and musicians from around the world coming to hear the janitor's daughter, who had become classical music's most talked-about young composer. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and slipped out of bed. In the living room, she sat at her piano, no longer the loaned baby grand but her own instrument, a gift from a group of benefactors who had formed a foundation in her name to support other musically gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. She didn't turn on the lights. In the darkness, with only the city's glow filtering through the windows, she placed her hands on the keys and began to play, not her concerto, but a simple melody she'd composed in those early days with Dr. Winters. A melody about beginnings. Morning came too quickly. The day passed in a blur of preparations. Her final rehearsal with the orchestra, a light lunch she barely tasted, the careful ritual of dressing for the performance. Her concert attire was elegant but simple, a midnight blue gown that shimmered subtly under the lights, her mother's small pearl earrings, and Madame Durant's silver hair clip securing her dark hair away from her face. Backstage at Carnegie Hall was a maze of controlled chaos. Musicians tuning instruments, stage managers checking lighting cues, well-wishers stopping by to offer encouragement. Lily found a quiet corner, closed her eyes, and took slow, measured breaths the way Madame Durant had taught her to manage performance anxiety. 5 minutes. "Miss Chen," a stagehand called. Lily opened her eyes to find her father approaching, accompanied by Madame Durant, Dr. Winters, and Anton Visser, the 4 people who had shaped her journey more than any others. "We wanted to see you before you went on," Dr. Winters said, his kind eyes crinkling with pride. Madame Durant adjusted the silver clip in Lily's hair with gentle fingers. "Remember what I taught you about the opening? Take your time. Make them wait for that first note." Anton Visser, never one for sentimentality, simply nodded. "The piece is ready. You are ready." Her father said nothing but pulled her into a tight hug that spoke volumes. As they left to take their seats, Madame Durant turned back. "Lily," she said, "play for yourself first. The audience will follow." Then it was time. Lily walked onto the stage, the magnificent expanse of Carnegie Hall opening before her like a dream. The applause was thunderous, washing over her in waves as she made her way to the gleaming grand piano at center stage. The conductor, a renowned maestro who had taken a personal interest in her concerto, shook her hand warmly before turning to the orchestra. Lily sat, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap. She took one deep breath and looked up to signal her readiness. The orchestra began the opening theme, a questioning, searching melody that Lily had written to represent her early years, the longing for something unnamed. Then came her entrance, the piano joining the conversation with a voice that was at first tentative, then increasingly confident as she played. The journey of the past 3 years seemed to unfold through her music. There were echoes of Chopin and Rachmaninoff, nods to the classical tradition she had studied so diligently. But there was something else too, a fresh, distinctive voice that was uniquely her own. Critics would later write about the remarkable maturity of her composition, the way it balanced technical sophistication with emotional directness. But in this moment, Lily wasn't thinking about critics or reviews. She wasn't even thinking about the audience, though. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the stage lights sat hundreds of people, including a row of legendary musicians who had come to witness this debut. She was thinking only of the music, letting it flow through her with the same pure connection she had felt that very first night in the practice room. The concerto built to its final movement, a triumphant, joyful celebration that incorporated themes from throughout the piece, weaving them together into something whole and complete. As Lily's fingers danced across the keys, matching the orchestra note for note, she felt a curious sense of both excitement and peace. This was where she belonged. The final chords resounded through the hall, pianist and orchestra united in one last powerful statement. As the sound faded, there was a moment of complete silence, that magical space between the end of the music and the beginning of the audience's response, when time itself seemed suspended. Then came the applause, not just applause, but a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the historic hall. Lily rose from the piano bench, her heart full, and turned to acknowledge the orchestra before facing the audience. The stage lights made it difficult to see individual faces, but she knew exactly where her father would be sitting, and she directed her first bow toward him. The conductor gestured for her to take a solo bow, and as she did, flowers began appearing on stage, roses and lilies and wildflowers, tossed by audience members or brought forward by ushers. The applause continued, showing no signs of diminishing, and Lily found herself called back for 3 curtain calls before the audience finally allowed her to leave the stage. Backstage was a whirlwind of congratulations, orchestra members patting her shoulder, stage crew offering smiles and thumbs up, her small circle of supporters waiting to embrace her. But amidst the celebration, a strange melancholy touched Lily's heart. Something felt unfinished. "I need a moment," she whispered to her father, slipping away from the crowd. She found a quiet hallway and leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. The music still echoed in her mind, but now other memories joined it. Her mother's gentle hands guiding her childhood drawings, her father's tired smile after a long day's work, the feel of a mop handle as she sometimes helped him clean the conservatory floors. The path that had led her here had been filled with both struggle and joy, sacrifice and reward. A soft sound made her open her eyes. Down the hallway, a young girl stood watching her with awestruck eyes. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in her Sunday best for the concert, clutching a program in small hands. "Hello," Lily said gently. The girl took a hesitant step forward. "Are you really her? The pianist?" Lily nodded. "I am. What's your name?" "Grace," the girl said. "My music teacher brought our whole class tonight. She said we should see what's possible, even if you start with nothing." Something warm bloomed in Lily's chest. "Your teacher is very wise." The girl looked down at her program, then back up with determined eyes. "I want to be like you when I grow up. But my family doesn't have a piano. We don't even have a keyboard." For a moment, Lily saw herself in this child, the same hunger, the same dream. She knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. "Where do you take lessons?" "At my school." "But only once a week," Lily thought for a moment, then reached into her evening bag and pulled out a business card, one of the fancy ones the foundation had printed for her, with embossed gold lettering. "Give this to your teacher," she said, writing a note on the back. "Tell her to call this number. We have a program that might be able to help you." The girl's eyes widened as she took the card with reverent fingers. "Really?" "Really," Lily promised. "Music finds a way, Grace. Sometimes it just needs a little help." A woman's voice called from around the corner, presumably Grace's teacher looking for her wandering student. The girl quickly thanked Lily and darted away, the precious card clutched tightly in her hand. Lily straightened up, a new lightness in her heart. In that simple exchange, the circle had somehow completed itself. 3 years ago, she had been discovered, her hidden talent recognized and nurtured by those who could see its worth. Now perhaps she had begun the same process for another child. She made her way back to the reception, where her father waited with a glass of champagne and a knowing smile. "Everything okay?" he asked. Lily nodded, taking the glass. "Everything's perfect." She looked around at the celebrating crowd, at Madame Durand deep in conversation with a music critic, at Dr. Winters laughing with some board members, at Anton Visser discussing composition with a group of eager students. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think this is just the beginning." Her father raised his glass to hers with a soft clink. "It always is, Lily, for all of us every day." Outside Carnegie Hall, the city lights sparkled against the night sky, and somewhere in those streets, a young girl named Grace held a business card like a treasure, the first key to unlocking her own musical journey, just as Lily had once held the key to the practice room where her own story began.